Tonight, Nike, a brand so powerful, so dominant, it's known around the world.
Yeah, do it!
13,000 products, 16 billion in sales, and some of the most famous faces on the planet.
It's something that represented my name and what I did to the game of basketball. That has continually transcended over time.
A company with critics.
A transnational corporation that exploits people.
And connoisseurs.
It's my favorite pair.
He's gotta have the shoes. 350 pairs.
What percentage of your disposable income were you spending on shoes?
All of it, except for my mortgage.
It all started with a waffle iron and a college jock with an idea.
And did you really think you could implement it?
Yeah, I was too dumb to know better.
And now, in the design studio, on the factory floor, and behind the latest blockbuster, CNBC presents Swoosh, Inside Nike. From the Nike Town store in New York City, here's correspondent Darren Ravel.
Good evening. This is one of Nike's showcase stores, where the world's most powerful athletic shoe and apparel company displays its wares. It looks a little like a museum, which is fitting for a company that's turned its brand into a cultural icon. It all started with a few guys selling track shoes out of their cars. Over the years, Nike has pioneered the use of cheap foreign labor and provoked attacks from critics. It's produced groundbreaking advertising and spent a fortune paying celebrity athletes to create a mystique for its label. Today, the company is secretive, a bit mysterious, and wildly successful.
Nice and close together, yeah. There we go.
It's everything you'd expect of a movie premiere. But this premiere, it's for a shoe.
I'm here to go home in a pair.
The latest offering from Nike. Nike has this business of buzz down to a science. Not surprising from what may be the most successful marketing machine in history. A juggernaut that began with Nike's signature Air Jordan and continued for 22 more versions. The shoe that has become a part of Michael Jordan's legacy.
Why do people buy Air Jordans? Why did they buy them then, and why do they buy them now?
It's something that represented my name and what I did to the game of basketball. That has continually transcended over time.
It's no wonder that Nike named a building after Jordan. In 2007, the Jordan brand, now a separate Nike subsidiary, grossed about $800 million, just $100 million less than the entire company was pulling in when they signed him 23 years earlier. No one knows just how much Jordan did for Nike better than Nike founder Phil Knight, who talked to us in his trademark sunglasses.
So what did Jordan mean?
Jordan was huge and still is. He became ultimately probably the greatest basketball player of all time and set the tone for what became not just a great endorsement, but has now become a brand.
Michael Jordan's last game was in 2003, and yet Jordan brand sales keep growing.
Brand Jordan today sells about twice as much product around the world as when he was playing.
It almost didn't happen. When Jordan left the University of North Carolina in 1984, he was leaning heavily towards signing with Nike's arch-rival, Adidas.
The thing is, I never wore Nike shoes until I signed a Nike contract. All through college, we wore Converse. And up to that point, my favorite shoe was an Adidas shoe.
These are special.
It was Nike's basketball talent scout, Sonny Vaccaro, who convinced insiders they should spend everything they had to sign Jordan.
I said, well, what do we have? And we have about $500,000 to spend, you know. And I said, well, give it all to the kid, give it all to Jordan. And they said, well, we don't have to give him all of it. I said, no, if it takes giving him all, give it to Michael Jordan.
Nike made the bet, $500,000. At the time, an unheard of price for an endorsement deal, especially for someone who had yet to play a minute in the NBA.
We knew it would be good. We paid him the most money we could afford, and we overpaid, according to the other companies, you know, for someone who wasn't a proven commodity. But to Nike's credit, they did the right thing, and it caught fire. And this kid caught fire, and this sucker was good.
Nike also offered Jordan his own signature shoe line, a promise Adidas wouldn't match.
It didn't feel like it was worth it, which in hindsight is perfect for me because it made my decision that much easier, and I ended up with Nike, and it became a great relationship.
People wanted the shoes worn by the kid who could fly through the air and was averaging 28 points a game. Sales moved almost as fast as he did.
It was like an election night. Like, who's buying what? Oh my God, they sold 100 pair of shoes in Pittsburgh yesterday. They sold 400 pair in New York City. That's the way it was, like an election day count.
Since 1988, most Air Jordans have sprung from the creative partnership of Jordan and this man, former architect turned shoe designer Tinker Hatfield.
Where he has been really good over the years is he always asks the question, will the best players in the world be able to play in this shoe? Will I be able to play in this shoe? It ultimately boils down to what I call the romance of trying to draw out something unique from the athlete, from the personality, and from the relationship.
He called it a romance between you two. Why do people kind of relate to that?
Well, it's like a romance. Once you fall in love, it's hard not to fall in love with the person that brings you the most joy. I mean, it was like a marriage in the sense that he knew what I was thinking a lot of times. I knew what he was thinking a lot of times.
Designing an Air Jordan often begins with a simple idea. The 11 was Jordan's tribute to formal wear. When he pushed Hatfield for a toe piece so shiny, it looked like patent leather.
You just wait, he said. This shoe's going to be worn by somebody with a tuxedo.
Someone's going to be in a tuxedo wearing this shoe somewhere. And lo and behold, I think it was American Music Awards.
Boys to Men.
Boys to Men. Had the tuxedo
and
on.
You had nothing to do with it.
Nothing at all. It had nothing to do with them at all.
But along with the style and popularity of the Air Jordans came an industry-high price tag of more than $100 a pair. In the late 1980s, there were muggings, even murders over the shoes.
It's certainly been sad about the fact that people would harm one another just for material purposes to get a pair of shoes or rob somebody for something else. That's always been a sort of a sad commentary about culture.
When we visited Nike's Beaverton, Oregon headquarters, the company was throwing everything it had at the release of its latest Air Jordan, the Air 23.
Well, everybody in the industry is going to be launching their game shoe.
The focus? The NBA All-Star Game in New Orleans.
So then maybe at halftime comes, maybe we take all of our guys and we put them in the actual Air Jordan 23.
There it is.
Hatfield gave us an advance look.
And I see a fingerprint.
That's Michael's thumbprint, slightly modified so that no one could actually use his thumbprint for anything.
Ooh, that's smart by you. Okay, what do we have here?
We were inspired by fine craftsmanship in Italy and in France, and we really wanted this shoe to be the ultimate in
the whole hand-sewn idea.
Hand-sewn. We're using earth-friendly materials and removing a lot of adhesives from the shoe so that it's actually held together more by the stitching than it is by glue. Personally, I think it's the most beautiful product that I've ever worked on.
This was the scene outside a New York City shoe store in 25-degree weather. Customers eagerly awaiting the new sneaker's limited release. Some had been in line for 5 days.
If you want to get your hands on them, that's what you got to do.
So how long can this go on? How long can Jordan and Nike continue to create the most successful shoes in all of sports?
I look forward to it lasting another 23 years.
Jordan 46 is going to be great.
Could be. Could be.
Coming up, how a ragtag group of college jocks used grit, marketing genius, and a little luck to dominate an entire industry.
I think that unnerves some people because we're very powerful, we're very successful, very smart.
The birth of an empire when Swoosh Inside Nike returns. We now return to Swoosh Inside Nike.
Started by a few running geeks on a shoestring, Nike Inc. has become this, the world's dominant athletic shoe and apparel company. Its sprawling 200-acre headquarters is home to a small empire. Here at Nike's Nerve Center in Beaverton, Oregon, just west of Portland, some 6,000 employees push to maintain that dominance. The campus's 16 buildings, each named after a Nike athlete, are encircled by a 14-foot-high grass-covered berm. And for those who are Nike-minded, this berm has become as significant as the company's logo. Outside this berm lies the real world. Inside, well, it's different.
Inside the berm is this cult. Nike, oh, and all these people coming to work here. It's not a cult, but it's the culture that's inside here. It's not your normal workplace.
It never was. Nelson Farris, one of Nike's first staffers, carries the company's institutional memory.
We got started with no knowledge, no brand. We did things under impossible odds. We had the courage to change. We innovated like crazy to compete.
Mark Parker, who's been with the company for nearly 3 decades, rose through Nike's ranks to become the company's CEO.
My first 2 years at Nike, I had 8 different jobs. It was definitely organized chaos in some senses. There was some framework and structure to what we were doing, but it was definitely, work by the gut, more intuitive.
The company mission to make great shoes for remarkable athletes was established by the 2 men who founded what was first called the Blue Ribbon Sports Company, Phil "Buck" Knight and Bill Bowerman. When they met in the mid-1950s at the University of Oregon, Knight was a 17-year-old middle-distance runner. Bowerman was his demanding coach. In an effort to find the most efficient shoes for his runners, Bowerman obsessively tore apart and rebuilt their shoes. Even his wife's waffle iron wasn't safe from his quest for the perfect sole.
He was talking to his wife, looking at the pattern in that waffle iron. Waited till she went to church, by the way, and then took the waffle iron out in the garage and poured some latex stuff in it and baked himself some sheets of waffle, inverted the sheets, and came and started to make some samples with that waffle pattern.
For Bowerman, no shoes were good enough or light enough.
I used to go present to the board of directors as a young designer. I'd go in, and Bill Bowerman would come in with his old briefcase, and then he would pull out a postage scale, which I would hand the shoe down. Bill would take it and put it on the scale, and invariably say, "Is this the best you can do?"
Phil Knight had his own obsessions. He felt sure Bowerman's designs could make money.
He thought that Bowerman's ideas on footwear could be taken to Japan to find a company that could make those shoes, bring them into the U.S., sell to U.S. runners, and compete with the shoes coming from Germany. It was that simple.
So in 1959, while enrolled in Stanford's business school, Knight wrote a paper that became the blueprint for Nike.
What did you get on that paper?
I got an A on the paper.
You did get an A on the paper?
And that helped because obviously it was sort of an offbeat idea on how to make inroads into the athletic shoe business.
Right. And did you really think you could implement it?
Yeah, I was too dumb to know better.
After graduating, Knight took off for Japan, where he made a deal with the Onitsuka Company to distribute Tigers, their little-known brand of track shoes. Back in the States, he sold the shoes at track meets from the back seat of his car. Yet his long-term goal was anything but humble: the domination of the American athletic shoe market. In 1972, Knight and his team committed to debuting a new line, but they had no name and no logo. An employee came up with the name in the most unlikely of ways.
He literally woke up in the morning and sat up in bed and blurted out the name Nike. He wrote it down on a piece of paper. He says, "I got the name. Nike, it's Greek, means victory." He says, "What a perfect name."
For the logo, Knight turned to a local design student named Carolyn Davidson.
So I just went to the graphic arts department at Portland State, and there was a woman looking for, a young lady looking for a way to pay for her dress for the dance in a month, and so we paid her $2 an hour to come up with the mark.
And she shows you basically a sheet of bloated check marks.
Yeah, in 25 words or less, that's right. That she had several renditions of what ultimately became the swoosh, and we kept saying, narrow it here, narrow it there, change it there, and well, I guess 17 and a half hours later, we had it.
The price Knight paid for the iconic logo? $35. Throughout the 70s, Knight moved aggressively to beat back the hold his arch-enemy Adidas had on the American market. He used groundbreaking and irreverent advertising that would eventually help establish the Nike brand. Knight also tapped a roster of superstars, none more famous than a kid from the University of North Carolina. And not long after Michael Jordan came on board, Nike overtook Adidas to become the #1 athletic shoe company in America. Phil Knight's dream had become a reality. Today, with annual sales of more than $16 billion, the company is stronger than ever. Nike owns more than a third of the world's athletic shoe business, soundly topping its closest competitor, Adidas. And with $600 million in sales, upstart Under Armour has made Nike sweat, but only a little.
We're fierce competitors, and whenever you're that good, you always have detractors, always. And we say, bring it on. I think that unnerves some people because we're very powerful, we're very successful, we're very smart.
And very rich. Phil Knight has a net worth estimated at $9.5 billion. Nike now sells nearly 13,000 different products, made by 750,000 factory workers around the world. The company is staking its future on the global marketplace. Nearly half of its sales come from beyond the border. Soccer alone bringing in $1.5 billion a year. But with Nike's tremendous size and success comes the danger of complacency.
How does Nike stay hungry now that it's in what some people will say the best position of its life?
Well, it's a very, very competitive business, and every 6 months is a new life. And if you're not a little bit nervous about the next 6 months, you don't know what's going on. And I think we've had enough people around here that have spent their lives in this business that they know what it is to have a bad 6 months or a bad year or a bad couple of years, and we don't want those again. So they'll keep reminding people, and if they won't, I will.
Coming up, when it comes to advertising, Nike makes it look easy. But this trick wasn't in the script.
We had some downtime. The director saw it. I was on his way to the bathroom. And he sees it and says, can you do that on camera? I said, yeah, sure, whatever.
Going for the green when Swoosh Inside Nike returns. We now return to Swoosh Inside Nike.
The images are the stuff of advertising legend. Adrenaline-inducing. Often controversial.
Is it the shoes?
Sometimes funny.
Cooler shoes. Well, I guess Spike Lee wasn't available.
And always captivating.
Don't I know you? Now where's that Tour de France thing?
The creative mind behind the magic is Dan Wyden, founder of the agency that bears his name. Nike founder Phil Knight was Wyden and Kennedy's first client.
The first time I met Phil was the year after we were given the business. They were having a sales meeting at Sun Valley, and I met him by the ice rink, and I was introduced to him, and he literally stuck out his hand and said, I'm Phil Knight, and you should know I don't believe in advertising.
I suppose it was really kind of my stupidity. The advertising agency would come by and they'd make these presentations. It didn't make sense to me. So I got into a point where I said, I really don't like advertising. And it took Wyden to convince me otherwise.
They said, look, you have to realize that what we're trying to do is communicate to our friends, our buddies, our athletic jock guys. So we don't want anything to even appear like advertising.
Today at Nike, we know even more.
They agreed to craft ads that were more insider information than advertising shtick. The partnership pursued an unorthodox approach, which would ultimately lead to trouble. In 1987, Apple Records sued Nike over the use of the Beatles song Revolution. The legal case was eventually settled out of court, but ironically, the resulting sensation brought with it free publicity. For Nike, any doubts about the power of advertising were gone.
When some of this stuff started becoming controversial and then having a great impact, and the sales starts moving, and then they start realizing people actually, this is a way people can understand what this company is about. And once they did television, they realized, wow, this is quite incredible.
The hits kept coming.
Bo knows football.
In 1988, Nike tapped a unique talent to promote its revolutionary cross trainer, a shoe designed for any act. a shoe designed for any.
Bo knows basketball too.
The ads of multi-sport star Bo Jackson were a home run.
Bo knows baseball.
They showed him excelling.
Bo knows tennis?
At, well, almost everything.
No.
Tacked on to the end of the ad, 3 simple words, which became some of the most memorable in advertising history.
And the shock was that the people that told us that it worked was the audience. I mean, we started getting letters from people that had nothing to do with sports, but about how it had saved their emotional health, and I was like, holy cripes.
The tagline soon became an international phenomenon.
Yes, do it!
A year later, I was in France, and I started seeing people with the sweatshirt just do it on there, and I was like, this stuff spreads like a disease.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Flight 23.
As Just Do It took off, another Nike athlete was beginning to take flight in the pop culture arena. Michael Jordan was quickly becoming the face of the NBA and of Nike.
Yo, Mike, what makes you the best player in the universe?
But it was an unlikely pairing with young filmmaker Spike Lee that allowed him to soar to an even higher level as a pitchman.
Is it an extra long shorts?
No, Mars.
It's the shoes then, right?
Nah.
Even Michael Jordan himself was surprised by the reaction.
Did you ever think it would catch fire like it did?
No, because I think part of that success came from Spike's success. You know, he came on with his admiration for our shoes. And it didn't take away from what I was doing on the basketball court. If anything, it added to that, and it carried it into something that was totally away from basketball, which gave it new legs.
With Jordan driving sales, Nike signed off on an idea presented by another hoop star, Charles Barkley. The result, an ad that was more social statement than product pitch.
I am not a role model. Parents should be role models.
The ad set off a firestorm.
It's the greatest thing I've done in my career. It started a national debate on what a role model is. I don't want jocks to be role models because these kids aren't going to play in the NBA or the NFL. We need, especially the black kids, to think about being doctors, lawyers, engineers, teachers, firemen, and policemen. And that's why I made the commercial.
While most commercials were carefully designed to deliver a message, some of the best stemmed from spur-of-the-moment inspiration. Tiger Woods described one happy accident.
We were having some downtime, and I was doing a clinic, basically for everyone there, just to entertain them, a bunch of extras. And I was doing a spot where I was just bouncing the ball up, and I was just whacking like baseball, because I grew up playing baseball. Well, the director saw it. I was on his way to the bathroom, and he sees it and says, can you do that on camera? And I said, yeah, sure, whatever.
I said, I want to write it, direct it, produce it.
In 2003, Nike signed LeBron James, who grew up watching Nike ads.
You believed if you had a pair of Air Jordans that you could fly. Literally, you really believed that you can fly through the air like Michael Jordan. You really believed that you can shoot a fadeaway like Michael Jordan, that you can win championships like Michael Jordan, just because if you had those shoes on.
It was a foul.
Today, it's his turn. Like his idol, he's uniquely comfortable in front of a camera.
He don't want to play no defense. He too cute. Time out, time out, time out.
It was all ad-lib. It was me just basically just being myself and trying to accomplish what myself and what Nike wanted to get across.
With television audiences growing smaller, these days Nike is taking its advertising online, where the company is building communities to promote its products. Despite the shift, Wyden says the mission remains the same, instilling aspirations rather than catering to consumer desires.
They haven't changed.
No, in many, many ways they have not changed. They're still trying to say what seems so elusive to say and to do what seems so elusive to do.
After more than 25 years and scores of artfully crafted commercials, the one thing that doesn't seem elusive is Nike's iconic message.
Coming up, when harsh factory conditions made the headlines a decade ago, Nike's reputation took a hit. A trip to Vietnam to see what's changed and what hasn't.
That 10,000 workers are willing to walk off the job shows that there are some serious issues in that factory.
Labor pains when Swoosh Inside Nike returns. We now return to Swoosh Inside Nike.
Everyone, it seems, says yes to Nike. Consumers want to buy the brand, athletes line up to endorse it. But what happens if you take on one of the most powerful companies on the planet? In 1998, a man named James Keaty found out. Keaty was a Catholic theology student and assistant varsity soccer coach at St. John's University. The school had a multi-million-dollar endorsement deal with Nike. The team would get free gear, and Nike would get advertising. A sweet deal. But then, Keaty began to look into the way Nike treated its workers.
What I found was, in doing this research, if you wanted to find a company that completely violated everything that Catholic social teaching is about, Nike's the perfect case study.
Appalled by what he called abusive labor practices, Keaty refused to wear the swoosh.
Nobody talked to me about advertising for a transnational corporation that exploits people.
It proved to be a career decision. Keaty says he was forced to resign as coach, which only pushed him to delve deeper.
I went to go live with Nike factory workers in a slum outside of Jakarta, Indonesia.
Yesterday we lived on the basic wage of the workers.
And trying to survive on their spending power, which at the time was $1.25 a day. And in doing that, and trying to live like a Nike factory worker, I lost 25 pounds in 1 month.
As Keaty and other activists began to trumpet their findings, the company found itself in the middle of a public relations disaster. Nike became synonymous with sweatshops. Founder Phil Knight acknowledged the debacle when he addressed the National Press Club that same year.
A Nike product has become synonymous with slave wages, forced overtime, and arbitrary abuse.
Humiliated by a stain on its corporate image, Nike turned the crisis into an opportunity and vowed to improve its factories. The company now employs a staff of more than 100 to monitor conditions at almost 700 plants in 52 countries and makes their findings public.
Our immediate reaction was, which was really kind of my fault more than anybody else, was really sort of defensive. They said they're not bad factories, da-da-da-da. And really, we've made much better traction in saying every year we're going to make these factories better and better in every way. And if you don't believe us, come look at it.
So we did. To see for ourselves, we traveled to communist Vietnam, where Nike pioneered outsourcing, benefiting from low-cost labor and weak unions. In 2008, more than 80 million pairs of Nike shoes will say made in Vietnam. With some 200,000 people producing Nike product here, the size of the workforce makes Nike this nation's largest foreign employer. The company opened its doors to us. The 3 plants we visited, like all Nike factories, are owned by independent contractors. Each was clean and well lit. Nike even provides free meals and high school equivalency classes. The company eagerly introduced us to one of its workers, Jin Nguyen. Jin was handpicked for our interview by the state-run labor union and said life on Nike's factory line was just fine.
There were all these stories that workers were getting treated badly and that the factory conditions were bad. The general working conditions of where you work, how do you feel about them?
It's very comfortable. The worker and the staff, even the managers, can talk together and get ideas together.
So if you have a problem, they will listen to you?
Yes, of course.
When it comes to the treatment of its workers, many outside observers we talk to agree. Nike has become the industry gold standard. But we discovered that in Vietnam, even the gold standard can't avoid labor problems. Nike told us 10 of its 35 plants here were hit by strikes in 2007. One occurred at its Taekwondo plant outside Ho Chi Minh City.
That 10,000 workers are willing to walk off the job shows that there are some serious issues in that factory.
Dara O'Rourke is a UC Berkeley professor of labor and environmental policy. He has studied Nike's labor conditions for the past decade.
Nike has not solved all of the issues in its factory. They need to take seriously these issues about worker pay, hours of work, working conditions.
We tracked down some of those Taekwondo workers who had gone out on strike. They asked us to disguise their identities for fear of retribution from factory bosses. Through an interpreter, these workers told us they make barely enough to live.
This can't possibly be enough. Not talking about my family, just supporting myself. There is no leftover, no surplus, just enough to live.
In a one-room apartment, home to a couple and their baby, the workers also complained of forced overtime and verbal abuse from their bosses.
If you don't do it right, you get cursed at. They yell really loud, and the workers feel humiliated with people around them. They yell really loud, and it makes you feel ashamed.
We told the women we were in contact with Nike chairman Phil Knight. They had a message for him.
You guys tell him that we need him to pay a little more attention to the workers so that we have the spirit to work.
Instead of putting their plea to Phil Knight, we put it to Hannah Jones, Nike's vice president of corporate responsibility.
One of the workers told us this: please tell Nike that we are asking for is more respect and consideration. How do you give a person doing this job more respect and consideration?
What we need to shift is this old school mentality that the worker is a commodity. And what we need to do is make sure that people understand that the worker is at the heart of the value proposition of any factory.
Nike denies that it forces overtime in the Taekwondo plant and says it's working hard to put an end to cases of verbal harassment.
Seems like there's always the concern for them about the humiliation, sometimes the screaming.
The broader issue of worker harassment, and particularly verbal harassment, has definitely been an issue that we've done a lot of work on and that we continue to work on. One of the big targets includes how do you really build the worker to feel empowered and to feel in a safe place in the workplace.
But the biggest issue remains. For an $80 shoe, Nike pays the factory about $20. 10% of that, $2, goes to the workers. That's the going rate throughout the third world, and the workers here say it's not enough.
We unfortunately don't think there's a magic wand here. We don't think there's, anything that you can suddenly do overnight, like flipping the switch and artificially hiking wages in factories.
Instead, Jones says Nike's practice is to offer a salary determined by the free market.
It's my responsibility to ensure that the worker is paid a competitive wage.
But in a communist country where workers have little freedom to negotiate salaries, a truly competitive wage may be hard to come by. And that's not the only problem. Their wages can't keep up with rampant inflation. The cost of gas and food here has made it hard for the average factory worker to make ends meet. Double-digit inflation is hitting Vietnam hard.
Rice increased in price, meat and fish increased in price, everything increased in price.
The shrinking value of Vietnam's currency is one reason Nike's not alone in facing labor unrest. There were some 400 strikes throughout Vietnam in 2007. While Nike may indeed be the gold standard, like thousands of other companies, it continues to wrestle with fundamental questions. What are workers owed? And how do you make sure they get it?
I don't think anyone has written the book on how you run an equitable, just global supply chain.
Do you ever finish?
I don't think there's a finish line. We say that in Nike all the time. I don't think so. I don't think you do.
Coming up, would you pay $1,500 for a pair of sneakers?
Some people think you're crazy. Some people think all these sneakerheads are crazy. It's a shoe.
I express myself with the way I dress. It's just personal preference, I guess, as far as art.
Meet the sneakerheads when Swoosh Inside Nike continues. We now return to Swoosh Inside Nike.
not so long ago, skateboarding was the refuge of defiant teenage renegades. Barely considered a sport, it was raw, edgy, and dangerous. A counterculture that was ignored by industry, and skate enthusiasts wanted nothing to do with big corporations like Nike. But in the early 90s, the wheels began to turn. Skateboarding emerged from the underground and went mainstream. Businesses once wary of skateboarders began fighting for their dollars, and Nike was no exception. To old-school purists like Steve Birdo Geisinger, it was an affront.
Why does Nike not deserve to be in the skate industry?
They're not skateboarders. And being in the skateboard industry for so long and seeing it grew from a passion. The American dream, in my eyes, is making a living doing something you love, not necessarily the game of Monopoly. It's a good luck board.
In its fight to keep skate pure, Birdo's company, Consolidated Skateboards, made a play on Nike's famous Just Do It slogan.
We ran an informational campaign called the Don't Do It campaign, educating skateboarders on what we felt the dangers were going to be by legitimizing them in the industry.
They feared large corporations would wipe out the smaller companies built by the skateboarders, so they fought to stop Nike in its tracks. To help crack the market, Nike bought into two skateboard companies, Hurley and Xavier, but that didn't make up much ground. So in true Nike style, it regrouped. Nike CEO Mark Parker.
Why didn't the attempts to get into the skate business work before?
I think because we never really committed to the sport until really about 4 or 5 years ago. We dabbled, and we're not good at dabbling. I think we're at our best when we commit.
So Parker tapped a retired Nike executive, 50-something Sandy Bodecker, for the mission of infiltrating the market of young, nonconformist skateboarders.
They were wary to let a larger company, whether it was us or anybody else, into participating in their world. What they really did want to see from anybody is a true commitment and a true understanding and a shared passion for what they do.
In 2001, with Bodecker at the helm, they created a new division aiming at the heart of the skateboard community, the skate shops.
Can I get this in at 9.5?
Most of core skateboarding is done with individual stores, and they live and die by the people that come into their stores. So our commitment to them was that the only place that you could get Nike skateboarding product was going to be in their doors.
In 2003, they introduced their skateboard line, Nike SB. They redesigned the Dunk, a basketball shoe already hot in the skater world. With a little more padding in critical areas, the Dunk was ready to ride. Using a familiar tactic from a generation ago, when Nike tapped a promising rookie named Michael Jordan to sell their basketball shoes, it pinned its hopes on an untested 19-year-old rookie. Paul Rodriguez Jr., skate name, P-Rod. A professional freestyle street skater with a goofy stance and an incredible switch front heel flip.
Coming from a skateboarder, you know, you go to a company and they just have like a warehouse and a little office. But Nike is just so next level. I was walking onto a campus, like a UCLA-sized campus, and they took me on the whole tour, showed me all the departments, and I was hooked. I was stoked.
Were you concerned of people saying, oh, he's a sellout, he went to the big Nike?
To an extent, but I don't try to worry about what other people say. I try to worry about how I feel about the situation. If I don't feel right about it, then I'll worry about it.
With P-Rod's input,
like automatically they just feel like I can just start skating them.
And his face and name on a new SB sneaker.
Oh yeah, I love you. Yeah, I love you back. What's up, man? How you doing?
The Swoosh was on a roll.
So what do you think about your shoes?
I love them. I like the way they look and I like the way they skate. And it works good and looks good.
The skateboard shoes looked so good, they caught the eye of people outside the skate parks. Like the What the Dunk shoe. S-N-E-A-K-E-R. Coveted by sneaker collectors. S-N-E-A-K-E-R. coveted by sneaker collectors, known as sneakerheads. A devoted band of fashionistas with a shoe fetish that could make Imelda Marcos blush. Like Chicago salon owner Melo Rosario, who spends a significant cut of his income on sneakers, $1,000 to $2,000 a month.
At the height of your craze, what percentage of your disposable income were you spending on shoes?
All of it, except for my mortgage.
Here it is.
It's the room. Wow.
His bedroom became a closet, his collection an obsession.
The PlayStation.
The thrill of the hunt for the most unusual sneakers.
What you got new? What you got new, man?
Actually, we just got some of that.
With more than 350 pairs of Nikes in his collection,
those are hot.
Yeah, it's pretty sick.
Melo wears every one. And when they aren't on his feet or at home, they're on display at his salon.
Some people think you're crazy. Some people think all these sneakerheads are crazy. It's a shoe.
Myself as a sneakerhead or collector, I express myself with the way I dress it up or whatever. It's just personal preference, I guess, as far as art.
Sneaker connoisseurs like Rosario converge on events like the Dunk Exchange, a sneaker bazaar where people come to buy, sell, and trade the hottest sneakers to the hottest beats.
I got a fresh pair, hop out of the bar, but
whether hand-painted or a hard-to-find classic.
OG Cardinal 7s from 1992.
Like any collector, sneakerheads carefully consider each purchase. Rain, sleet, and snow won't stop a sneakerhead on a mission. When a new shoe is released, they line up days in advance.
I really want these shoes. I've been here since Wednesday. It's Friday now. They come out tomorrow, Saturday.
Give me a story. Give me the shoe you had to have.
We flew out to Seattle, camped out there for about a day and a half.
What was the shoe?
It was a Cowboy Air Max 95, so collector.
How much did that shoe cost?
You know, like standard box price was $145. But that same day, that shoe was selling on eBay for like $700.
And Nike fuels that kind of frenzy. In 2007, they released more than 300 limited edition styles, selling for up to $145. But their resale value is even higher.
Nice.
How about $1,500 for this pair of laser-designed premium Air Force Ones? A shoe so hot, its designer has a cult following. His name, Mark Smith.
How has the idea of limited edition sneakers changed the world that Nike's in?
Limited edition sneakers offers the opportunity to kind of delve into areas of the population that we normally wouldn't have had access to before. Whether it's collectors who are into a certain artist, or if it's event-based sneakers that specifically hit a moment in time.
Smith is famous for his laser work and was the first to bring this intricate design to the sneaker canvas.
Well, this was the first laser product that we put together. It was an Air Force One, and it was in 2003, and we like to say we barely scratched the surface on this one.
As stylish as their sneakers are, Nike maintains the most important measure of a shoe's design is how it performs for the athlete, playing basketball, running, or skateboarding. And CEO Mark Parker says, we ain't seen nothing yet.
People used to ask me, what more can you do with shoes that hasn't already been done? Here I am 27, 28 years later, and I see more potential for innovation and product than ever before.
For nearly 40 years, Nike has approached every challenge by doing what CEO Mark Parker calls a deep dive, researching the playing field, creating a strategy, and then fiercely throwing resources at it. To paraphrase one company executive, everyone with a body is an athlete. So Nike will stop at nothing to penetrate every sport, every market, and find ways to sell you a sneaker, a shirt, or a ball. For CNBC, I'm Darren Rovell. Thanks for watching.